I wasn't a fan of Late Night with the Devil. It's too bad since I really did want to like it. As someone who's been watching the analog horror genre with a close eye for a little while now, I was really expecting this film to be the one to finally take it a step forward. I saw so much praise for this movie in the days following its release, and I'm not really sure where all the hype came from. It does have some solid moments, but I think a lot of laziness turned this into a worse film than it should have been. That, coupled with the fact that the filmmakers were one of the first to use AI in a major production, and don't you worry, we'll get into that a little later, I came out of Late Night with the Devil feeling a bit underwhelmed. It's a shame that David Dastmalchian, who is genuinely a huge horror fan, is attached to this pretty weak horror outing. The fact that Late Night with the Devil fails to provide enough material for him to excel in is just such a missed opportunity. It's a frustratingly mediocre film. There are so many paths an idea like this could have taken, but more often than not, it chooses an unsatisfying one. Was everyone just starved for horror when this was released? They really shouldn't have been, especially when you consider that this was marketed as an analog horror, something that we've yet to see successfully make its way to mainstream film. Late Night with the Devil should have been something new, but instead, it just ends up feeling old and tired in a rapidly evolving genre. I think a lot of the film's problems can be traced back to taking risk in the wrong areas. It's really a lack of smart risk that permeates a lot of Late Night for me. The intro, for instance, was pretty cheap and a bit campy for a movie that plays the whole thing surprisingly straight. The opening section establishes night owls, the cult, and Jack Delroy's involvement with the cultist, which gives us a huge exposition dump to sit through. If the directors wanted to add an air of mystery, they really could have gone right into the show and fed the audience little details throughout, much like a true analog horror would. Another key example of a not-so-smart risk was the decision to cut the commercials. I know this is a common sticking point with the movie, but it really was such a missed opportunity, especially when it comes to world building. They already had a lot of world building in the intro news clippings, so why not lean into that with some commercials? Instead, the directors took a risk and chose to follow the action behind the scenes, cutting out the need for commercials. As a result of this, we're no longer following the found footage model. The framework of "we found this haunted recording from the 70s" doesn't really work with dramatic cutaways. Although these are very loosely explained as being the result of a documentary crew's found footage, it's really just a way for the directors to tell a story in a much more conventional format. I've seen a lot of people comparing this to another film on Shudder, the WNUF Halloween Special. WNUF has its own problems, especially when it comes to an over-reliance on commercials, but at the very least, it presents some new ideas and has fun with the execution of those ideas. Yes, it may drag a bit somewhere in the middle, but at least it commits to the bit, sticking to the original found footage format at all times. The black and white documentary scenes were fine as a structural tool, but Late Night presented no opportunities for metafiction, and I feel like that's a very big part of analog horror. At times, it even dragged despite its short runtime. It felt like there was just a lack of fun, honestly. While I appreciate them taking a different approach, I think commercials could have made for a tighter project. As it stands, this risk made an entire section of Late Night feel like a cop-out. Then, of course, there's really bad risk, like, as the filmmakers put it, experimenting with AI, but we'll get to that. In contrast, I think there's a real lack of risk in the character of Jack Delroy. I really admire Dastmalchian as an actor. He's perfect in every role he plays, but I think he's wasted here as a mild-mannered host. In my research, I found a fun in-universe promo that gives us another look at what the character could have been. While it's not radically different from what we ended up with, it's still cool to see this idea fleshed out, and it illustrates that there are some missed opportunities in the Jack Delroy character. He's louder, sporting these long sideburns and bigger hair. He also acts more like an engaging host than the somewhat subdued one we see in the film. I get that the character is in a very different situation during the Halloween broadcast, but pretty often the film sees Jack flip-flopping between meek, horrified host and quick-witted presenter. In this promo anyway, it looks like Dastmalchian had a lot of fun with the character and improv. Despite how negative I've been so far, I'm a firm believer of great moments in bad movies. And there's one moment in particular where Late Night really shines. The hypnosis scene feels like the scene of the film. It's so well done, and I think this is probably one of the earlier ideas that the directors were able to actually take their time on and develop. It's visually engaging and ties the film together thematically, presenting us with the idea of false realities and the power of illusions. Effectively asking the viewer, are the possessions we see throughout the film real or illusory? Partway into the film, we're introduced to Carmichael Haig, expertly played by Ian Bliss. The character is a clear homage to famous skeptic James Randi, and serves as a way to introduce us to the idea of skepticism as it plays into the scene. Haig tests the audience's beliefs by hypnotizing Jack's co-host, Gus. From the get-go, the framing, the pacing, and everything about this scene sets the mood for something unsettling and engaging. The use of practical effects also goes a long way in achieving a genuine creepiness, especially in the first worm shots. Despite this being one of the film's more intense sequences, I love the little nods that Haig gives to the camera. It's one of the few moments that makes good on the campy nature that was promised in the opening moments. Haig's segment strays away from the found footage framework, but at least it does so in a very smart way, managing to tie the found footage aspect into the theme of false realities. The next few scenes are almost universally disliked, with many saying the ending of the film is its weakest part. The ending is especially what makes the tone of Late Night with the Devil so confusing. Is it a gore-fest portrayal of a talk show gone wrong, or a contemplative look at the nature of fanaticism and rituals? Look, I typically don't make negative videos. I don't really like to talk about movies I dislike, but there's a strange lack of videos criticizing Late Night with the Devil. Everyone seems to recognize that the film has flaws, but it feels like not many people want to be the one to say it's a bad movie. Probably because it's being poised as an indie darling at a time when we do need those. I rally for indie films, and while I appreciate some of Late Night's brighter spots, I don't rally for half-baked films. Except Half-Baked. In my opinion, you probably have a lot better things to watch this Halloween than Late Night with the Devil. Then, of course, there's that bit about AI. So I did hear about the usage of AI before seeing this film, and yes, even if I didn't know it, it's very apparent that they used it. But I was willing to set that aside and grade the film on its own merits. In various interviews, the filmmakers do seem to acknowledge that the usage of AI was a mistake, but my concern is with their attitude surrounding it. To paraphrase, their comments boil down to, "We were just trying things out, we swear no one lost their job over it, stop asking us about it. Oh, and if it gave the film more attention, that's fine with us." Something about that just doesn't sit right with me. Another bad risk is fine, but there was a very deliberate decision that was made here. While the two claim it didn't take anyone's job away from this project, it is indeed a very slippery slope. The use of AI brings its own discussion in terms of ethics, but we're ignoring something equally as important. It just doesn't look very good. I have reason to believe it wasn't just these interstitials either. Taking a look at the other graphics work and set design, they also kind of feel AI generated to me. Though I could be 100% wrong on that, I don't know. If you ask me, I honestly would go out on a limb and say that AI helped to fill out some of the plot. We've got this huge, clunky expository intro, a violent and abrupt ending, and a general lack of character motivations and arcs. Okay, that one might just be bad writing and not AI, but the result is a film that for the most part felt boring and uninspired, plotting through story beats all the way until its very predictable ending. By no means am I trying to turn the subject of this video into a witch hunt for AI usage. The point I'm trying to make here is that their reasoning for AI calls into question exactly how much they relied on it. Because of the controversy surrounding AI, Late Night with the Devil was initially review bombed. Review bombing makes it kinda hard to find the true rating of a film. People that hate it will review bomb, and people that like it will overcorrect the ratings to fix the bombing. I think the fallout from the entire AI situation and the director's subsequent apologies may be one of the reasons why it has such glowing reviews, since personally, I'm truly baffled by some reviews I've seen on YouTube and elsewhere. If you liked it, then more power to you, but this doesn't get anything more than a 3 in my eyes, and that's being extremely generous. As I mentioned before, the directors say they were using AI for experimentation. Well, not to dog on these guys too much, but I want the genre to embrace change and work with new ideas, rather than experiment solely in the interest of saving cost. Grey horror films have been coming out pretty steadily in recent years, and there are people making independent analog horror with less resources that's much more interesting in a shorter time frame. I've seen some things, especially in the analog horror space, that have me immediately scrolling down to the YouTube comment sections to hide. I'm sure most of you have heard of analog horror at some point, but for those who are unfamiliar, analog horror is a subgenre of horror, defined by its lo-fi aesthetic, which typically incorporates technology and visual stylings of the 80s and 90s. The true terror of analog horror lies in liminal spaces, the uncanny valley, and the feeling that something just isn't quite right. Great analog horror preys on our nostalgia, presenting us with something that's simultaneously familiar, but unnerving to watch. With that premise in mind, an old 70s late night show totally could have worked in this space. Projects like This House Has People in It, the VHS series In Lake Mungo, are all films that spring to mind when I think of this topic. They're just a few examples of analog horror that is a lot with a micro budget, and some other projects are just web series with practically no budget at all. Recently, Rainbot made an incredible video covering a somewhat new analog horror series by TikTok creator Spencer Lackey. You should check her video out if you haven't already, but in it, she showcases Spencer's short form horror projects. Some of these TikToks feel legitimately cursed, getting some visceral reactions out of me, and not in a way that feels like a cheap jump scare either. Well, sometimes. Spencer's first attempt at a long-form series, ASL, is framed as an investigation into a disturbing person. It's not a perfect series by any means, but it sticks to its intended found footage format. While Spencer's series is an example of short-form videos crossing over into long-form, the same can't be said for analog horror videos crossing over into feature film. I think it's weird that analog horror is having such a rough go at breaking into mainstream cinema successfully. The subgenre has all the components of a great horror film, but something about stretching out those short bursts of scares into a feature-length project really hasn't translated well yet. Skinamarink was, I feel, the closest attempt at creating a feature-length analog horror video, but the end result left a lot of audiences split. It's a very polarizing film, but what I admire about Skinamarink is the fact that the entire film was done in earnest. It actually started off as a short film, well, short by festival standards anyway, called Heck. Personally, I think it worked better as a short, but Skinamarink was still a great evolution of that concept. I do find these films more sad than scary if I'm being honest, but they still have that ever-present sense of dread that can be found in good analog horror. I get it though. Many of these projects are slow burns, and not super exciting for modern audiences. They're more existentially frightening in the same way that something like The 500 Million Year Button is frightening. It isn't not scary though. I mean, the entire last act was really just nightmare fuel, and oh my god, it was a mistake to watch this at 1 AM. Whether analog horror is still in its infancy or has completely run its course is up to you, but some of the projects that have come out of the space have shown me a potential road for the evolution of horror. By the way, did you know that they're still making a Backrooms movie? Talk about stretching out an idea. Films like Skinamarink are a step in the right direction, and while that film did a good job at further defining the genre of analog horror, it wasn't exactly able to elevate the genre alongside it. When you think of what Late Night with the Devil could have been, you start to realize just how much it missed its mark. It could have been a genuinely unsettling film, and sometimes it does attempt to be one, but it also tries to be campy, dramatic, and visceral, never fully achieving any of these tones. In an effort to find other late night talk shows for a section of this video that didn't really materialize, I ran into a lot of clips of Harlan Ellison. All this talk about AI, horror, and its future has me thinking about the impact he's left on the genre. I get that this is a tenuous connection at best, but I really wanted an excuse to talk about the works of Harlan Ellison. Specifically, Harlan Ellison's Watching, not the collection of essays published in 1989, but rather the short 1990s TV series that aired as part of Sci Fi Channel's Sci Fi Buzz. These are really proto-video essays when you think about it. Throughout the early years of broadcast film criticism, I don't think many others took the personal approach to discussing media that we see in so many video essays today. Film critics were usually placed in between segments on news channels. They let you know something was good or bad, maybe they debate a few points in either direction, Siskel and Ebert style, and then they cut to the next segment. Although Watching was itself part of a news show, Ellison uses the platform to explore a variety of topics from comic books to vintage cars, and with each review, we learn a little more about the reviewer. What movie cliches does he hate? How did the Northridge earthquake affect his home and collection? What are his thoughts on death after his heart attack? The first episodes are just rants in typical Harlan fashion. Naturally, being a prolific sci-fi writer, most of these were aimed at issues in the science fiction publishing industry. Still, the format was never static, and that's what felt so refreshing about it. Sometimes there's skits, sometimes there's interviews. Most of the time though, we hear Ellison implore his viewers to rediscover older authors and their works. As of this writing, you can find almost all the episodes of Watching on his YouTube channel. I'm glad he was able to secure the rights to these before his passing though, as I'm sure they would have been stuck in a Sci Fi Channel archive otherwise. The same can be said for another forgotten gem of the early 90s, Prisoners of Gravity, a Canadian-based news program hosted by Rick Green, which is currently shelved for various licensing reasons. If you're crafty enough, you could still find episodes of this on YouTube as well. Prisoners of Gravity follows Commander Rick, a rabid sci-fi and comic book fan who one day decides to leave Earth in his rocket-powered Chevy. After crash landing on a derelict satellite orbiting Earth, he and his computer companion Nancy interview notable science fiction authors of the time. The best way I can describe it is an extremely DIY Space Ghost Coast to Coast, except fully live action and not as wacky. Well, it's still a little wacky, but for the most part it's an interview show that discusses science fiction with a pretty honest reverence for the genre. It's probably for that reason that they were able to secure some pretty big names on the show. You'll see huge guests like Neil Gaiman, George R. R. Martin, Douglas Adams, and hey, there he is again, Harlan Ellison. Which takes me back to Watching, a show that's considered old media, which ruminates on even older media. There's a certain pace that I feel is inherent to older films and TV. While each episode of Watching is 3 to 4 minutes long, none of it feels particularly rushed. Ellison, who has since passed away in 2018, was a polarizing figure. By no means do I see eye to eye with him on a number of topics, but his contributions to fiction are undeniable. However, I bring up Harlan Ellison in particular because he was always an advocate for older media. A good amount of Watching doesn't revolve around discussing the films and books in the 90s, and when it does, it's not usually in a positive light. Most of Watching instead discusses underappreciated and long forgotten works from an even earlier time. I'm someone who's constantly watching older films, and most recently, as a result of the Maxine video, I've gone back to watching the gialli of the 70s and 80s. It was a really pleasant experience watching the films of Dario Argento and Mario Bava back to back for the first time. There's a lot to learn in older films, and when you start to enjoy them, you realize you're not going to run out of great films to watch anytime soon. You should really dive into older media if you don't already. Not everything is going to be for you, but I can promise you will find something to enjoy if you do. We don't need AI to generate some amalgam of reused ideas repackaged as new media for us. We should never be starved for horror, or any other genre for that matter, when there's a vast array of incredible works, long since buried and forgotten, that are just waiting to be discovered again. On one hand, analog horror is a brilliant idea that taps into our nostalgias and fears. On the other hand, it's made unnecessary by the mountains of hidden gems still buried from the eras it tries to emulate. It's high time we see a true, genre-defining analog horror make its way to the big screen. And until then, I'll be watching.
Because you're being denied all of these great works. Because all they want is to give you jello. They want to give you mush. You gotta resist that. You gotta say, I don't want any more mush. No more dopey trilogies about fuzzy-footed creatures.
Thank you for watching this video and for watching until the end. I wanted to make an announcement that some of you may have already seen in the community tab. Recently, I started writing some shorter reviews on Letterboxd, so if that's interesting to you, go ahead and give me a follow. And please check out my Ko-Fi as well if you'd like to support the channel. That's it for now, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good Halloween.